I thought this deal was super exciting because it was a group of millennial females who actually put their money together to purchase their first property. And not only did they purchase just a single family home, they then created a second unit in the basement and worked together to get two streams of income from that one property. So they sort of embody everything that I preach, and that
Mhm.
is being resourceful. If you cannot qualify on your own, we know that house prices today are crazy and that our incomes are not appreciating at the rate at which houses are. So one of the ways in which you can get into the market is through joint ventures, right? So they got a lawyer to do the appropriate documents, and then they were open to, once again, a house that needed a little bit of fixing, and they wanted to put that sweat equity in to force the appreciation. So those are my favorite types of deals.
How often have you sat down to assess your buying power? Creativity and building good habits are critical when growing your real estate portfolio in today's market. We sat down with Jayden Kennedy this week to talk about this, as well as pre-construction as an investment strategy. You're listening to the Black Wealth Effect podcast, where we're all about inspiring the next generation of Black Canadian real estate investors to succeed financially. If you're tuned in, that means you're hungry to take action and build wealth outside of your 9 to 5. We'll be sitting down with Black real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and allies to discuss a diverse set of topics to help you along your investing journey. Let's get started.
So welcome back to another podcast episode on the Black Wealth Effect podcast. My name is Ron. I'm your host for today. Unfortunately, I'm flying solo. Mario isn't with us today, but we do have a special guest with us. We have Miss Jayden Kennedy. Jayden, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm a big fan of yours as well. You're quite the social media sensation, so love the
Thank you
content
so
as well.
much. I love your guys' content. That's why I was open to going on this podcast, because you guys are all about educating people, especially within our community. And that's something that I would definitely not say no to.
Love it. And I guess that's how we really connected to your love and for educating people on real estate too. We saw that as well. So appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah. So we'll just jump right in, sticking with the theme that we usually have here on the podcast. We love to get to know our guests, I guess, on a bit of a deeper level.
Okay.
So you could just start us off and share a little bit about who Jayden is, how you got started investing in real estate, or more so like your career path in real estate, like, how you got started, what really drove you on that path, and maybe just like get into a few of your deals or your first major deal, what that actually looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So once again, my name is Jayden Kennedy. I have been a realtor for just over 2 years now and got my broker's license a few months ago, because once you hit the 2-year mark, that's when you're able to get your broker's license. And basically my story is I got a full ride scholarship to play volleyball in California, which was awesome. But it was at that school that had a lot of affluent students that I realized that the majority of people who are rich build their wealth through real estate, right? So I had conversations with them, their families, and even a lot of them had Airbnbs and locations that our volleyball team would go to. And I thought that this is something that was amazing. And I just never even thought about utilizing my money to then have a rental property and have someone cover the mortgage for that. And then when I want to go on vacation, I can go to said property. So I came back home, I had conversations specifically with people within our community, and I realized that no one really had that mindset. And I'm like, okay, I have access to people who have knowledge and I have access to the internet. So let me gain some knowledge from them and let me do my own research and then take it upon myself to sort of educate those around me and make confusing concepts easily digestible, so that number one, they can understand it and they can share it with their families. But then two, for myself and those around me, help them sort of take the first step to building generational wealth, because as we know, 9 out of 10 millionaires build their wealth or support their wealth through real estate. So came back home, I played professional volleyball overseas, then came here, got my real estate license, and now I am on social media sharing my experience with my property and just any type of real estate knowledge that I can.
That's dope. That's dope.
Thank you. So if we want to talk about a deal, we can talk about briefly, probably my second deal. And I thought this deal was super exciting because it was a group of millennial females who actually put their money together to purchase their first property. And not only did they purchase just a single family home, they then created a second unit in the basement and worked together to get two streams of income from that one property. So they sort of embody everything that I preach, and that is being resourceful. If you cannot qualify on your own, we know that house prices today are crazy and that our incomes are not appreciating at the rate at which houses are. So one of the ways in which you can get into the market is through joint ventures, right? So they got a lawyer to do the appropriate documents, and then they were open to, once again, a house that needed a little bit of fixing, and they wanted to put that sweat equity in to force the appreciation. So those are my favorite types of deals.
That's dope. I love that it's rare that you would hear someone take the opportunity when they go to college or university to really network and I guess like figure out life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Life is, and like try to figure it out, but rub shoulders with the right people and, come up with concepts on your own, right? So I love that you really took that on, and that kind of just changed the trajectory of your, I guess, like your family legacy, right? So
yes,
really
exactly. And like you were saying, really just rubbing shoulders with the right people when it comes to real estate. And, you're an investor, I'm an investor. It is imperative that you network your butt off, because your network literally is your net worth. So surrounding yourself with people who are doing what you are currently doing or what you aspire to do is really just going to help take you to the next level and inspire you.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And I think just to piggyback off of the first question there, if you were to, go back in time, knowing what you know today,
yes,
what sort of real estate advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self? Okay, so I would just say, because a lot of us, we don't necessarily have disposable income where we can say, okay, let's save $25,000 and, buy a house. Mm-hmm. So I would say my biggest piece of advice is to create a relationship with not only one, your spending habits and understand what your spending habits are, but number two, creating a relationship with your credit. Because I did not know when I was younger the value of credit. And today now I'm realizing that credit, if I want to borrow any type of money, I'm most likely going to want to have good credit, especially if I want to have the best interest rates. So I would have just focused a bit more on my relationship with money. I did dabble with stocks a little bit, prematurely did that, didn't do my due diligence. So just ensuring that whatever it is that you decide to invest your money into, that you consult people who specialize in those specific fields to mitigate risk as much as possible. So number one, come up with a financial plan and take a look at the subscriptions that I had, because I wasn't checking out my bank statements and I noticed that I was leaking money out left, right, and center. But if I had stayed on top of that, that money could have been put towards the side, and then I could have potentially made better investment decisions.
Love it. That's perfect advice. We as young people, we tend not to prioritize these, I guess, like small things, your credit and financial literacy. We don't prioritize that. So that's perfect advice for, a millennial out there.
A millennial. And that's the thing too, like a lot of people, especially like myself, I saw finances as something that was so dry and so boring. But once you realize the leverage that you can have by understanding finances, it completely changes the game, because then you realize, okay, I can utilize these financial strategies to set myself up for life, and not only myself, but my future generations. So financial literacy does not have to be boring. And that's why you got to listen to podcasts like this, because it's an unconventional way of learning, but it provides so much value.
Love it. That's a total mindset shift there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. And I guess just to, talk about today's market, looking ahead, rates are high, possibly. I think it just rose last month as well again. So cost of living is, at an all-time high, which could be discouraging to a lot of people to get into the market at the moment, or even just grow their portfolio, right?
For sure.
As a realtor, what type of advice or what kind of advice would you give to a buyer or client, the current environment that we are in? Like, what would you say to that person?
So what I always say is number one, I would try to get a pre-qualification. So if you're someone, you're like, hey, I want to purchase a property and you have no idea what your buying power would be, go talk to a mortgage agent or broker and get a pre-qualification. So this is simply where you tell them, hey, this is how much I make, this is my credit score, etc. And they will give you a ballpark for what you would be actually pre-approved for. You can then use this number, maybe reach out to a realtor and get an idea of where your buying power would be. Now, in today's market, because interest rates are a bit higher than what they've been in the past, a lot of people think that we're experiencing a crash. I'm simply saying it's a correction. And the main issue is not that there's a lack of demand, there's a lack of people who can actually qualify due to the interest rates. So if you are someone who can qualify for a property, I say it's in your best interest to get in while you can, because once we hear the increase we recently saw was 0.25, right? I think maybe we might see one or two more increases, and then we're going to chill for a bit. Maybe in 2024, we'll start to see rates go down. Now, if rates start to show a slowdown, I predict that more buyers are going to start to get into the market because they're going to feel a bit more comfortable because they've been so uncertain with the interest rate environment. Once we start to see that rates are going down, that's when the floodgates are going to completely reopen because more people are going to be able to qualify. So if you can qualify right now, in the event, you might have to drive till you qualify if you are open to doing that. But I would recommend getting in while you can now, while there is a bit less competition. I don't want to throw a wrench in here, but over the past week and a half, I have been seeing a crazy amount of action. I don't know if this is just a little spurt or if we're going to continue to see this, but the past 4 houses that I've offered on, they've all had 10 plus offers. So one of them was not in the first time home buyer bracket, but the other 3 were. So I don't know if this is specifically for just the first time home buyer price point, or if this is something that we're going to see sort of across the board.
Yeah. And I guess like next month would really shed a light on that data once it comes out. To your point, I think there's a bit more confidence because, it's speculated that this could be the last interest rate hike. So I think a lot more people are kind of like, okay, it's going to taper off. Maybe I should see where the chips may fall and like at least get an offer in and to see, if we could actually close on that property. So
exactly.
I could see where that increased interest is coming from.
Exactly. And it's like something else that I like to emphasize too is say the average house has gone down 300, 200,000 since the peak in February, March. You have to keep in mind that if you go to purchase a property now, number one, your principal is going to be $200,000 to $300,000 lower, right? You're also going to be able to have leverage against your neighbor when you go to resell because you're going to purchase it for $200,000 to $300,000 less. And if you were looking at the $1 million price point before, and it's now gone under the $1 million mark, you're no longer going to need that 20% down. So you could be saving over $100,000 on your down payment because you're no longer at the $1 million threshold. So those are also a couple of things that I say to my clients. And if you're looking to sell in this market right now, I recommend if you don't need to sell, do not sell. But if you plan on selling your property and moving up in the ladder, I think it's a great time to do so because yes, you might be taking a bit of a hit on the sale of your property, but if the other property is valued a bit more, they probably took a higher hit. And if you purchase the house lower, that means you're going to have more room for appreciation once the market rebounds. So that's sort of the advice I'm giving to buyers and sellers at this current moment.
Yeah. I love that perspective. I love that perspective that you share with your clients there.
It's all about the long-term game. Forget the ebbs and flows. Real estate long-term is always a dub.
Yeah, because it's going to get back to where it was previously at some point. Maybe not in 5 months, but maybe, 5 years. And again, it's a long-term approach, right?
Exactly. And it's like, even if we take a foundational approach, we have the numbers make sense. We're wanting 500,000 people to come into the country every year. Majority of them are going to land in the GTA and they're going to trickle out to the outskirts. So from a demand and supply perspective, it makes sense that we're going to continue to see appreciation in our properties.
Absolutely. And speaking of, demand and supply, we're seeing that the government's kind of looking to increase things on the supply side to kind of stabilize housing, and we may get into a topic and an investing strategy that doesn't have a great rep right now. But for our listeners, can you talk about, the pre-construction strategy as opposed to the resale strategy?
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar with pre-construction, you essentially buy a contract from a builder. If it's a condo, you buy a contract saying, hey, I'm buying this unit at this price. It's going to be in this location and be ready, say, 5 years down the line. Now, the benefits that come with this is because it's such an extended completion date, it's going to be a staggered deposit structure. You are going to need most likely 20% down, but you're going to have a few years to put that money down. Now, previously, I did feel like this was a really good investment strategy because you were purchasing tomorrow's home at today's price, right? So
Right.
you were getting a deal on the buy. And as investors, we want to win on the buy. The issue is right now with pre-construction, you're purchasing, say, at a 10, 20% premium in comparison to what we're seeing in the resale market right now. So to me, it would make more sense to purchase a resale property, have that appreciate for the 5 years that this condo is going to be completed, and
Mhm.
then you'll have the difference in price to leverage when it comes to resell the property. Another risk with pre-construction right now is that if you purchased, a few years ago or a couple years ago, with the interest rate environment, we weren't necessarily expecting this. So there's a lot of people who can't even close on the properties anymore and they are just stress selling. So if you are a buyer, now might actually be a good time to purchase an assignment, which is where someone sells their contract to you prior to it completing, because you'll be able to get a newer unit at a discounted price because these are distressed purchases.
Yeah. For our listeners out there, Jayden is giving you some top tips on how to find properties that, are discounted a bit. So I love that you
Yeah.
shared to look for assignments rather than, the conventional way of going through that whole pre-construction phase, right? So I love that.
Yeah, I think people, and a lot of people leave meat on the bone too, right? Like some people, they purchase only their strategy. Some people is I'm going to purchase pre-construction and assign it down the road because I don't want to wait the whole time, but I'm going to make a gain and I don't actually have to necessarily close on the property. Then there's other investors who only purchase assignment sales because they don't want to wait for that period of time for the product to be completed. So, hey, shorter timeline. I might not get the same gains that the other person got, but I'm still going to be making money. And then the third type of pre-construction investor is the person who strictly purchases distressed assignments. And so some
Mhm.
people are like, okay, we know people might not be able to close on the property. So we only want to purchase those because we know that we're going to get a good deal on them.
Okay. I love that. I love that. And you kind of touched on it before, but, what kind of advice would you give to someone, who's looking to build their knowledge around assignments and pre-constructions? Like, tools and resources are,
Mhm.
you advise?
So number one is just listening to sort of podcasts like this. Maybe go on YouTube. There's a lot of there's realtors who specialize in pre-construction, and then there's realtors who specialize in resale. The realtors who specialize in pre-construction, they are constantly providing a lot of educational content to ensure that you'll be able to understand what the process looks like and make sure that you have the appropriate funds, etc. So I would recommend just looking for people who have the experience, be it realtors, be people on YouTube or listening to podcasts. But I will say a couple pieces of advice if you are looking to purchase a pre-construction development is number one, you always want to ensure that you're purchasing during the first round. So they tend to sell pre-construction in different phases. You want to make sure that you get into round one because that is going to be the absolute cheapest. Once you hit round two, round three, round four, those people might be paying 20, 40, 60, $100,000 difference. And you want to make sure that once again, you are winning on the buy because if you purchase a unit that's $50,000 cheaper than your neighbor, once again, when you go to resale, you have that leverage. A couple other things I would say is there's something called development fees. You want to ensure that those are capped because when you go to purchase, if development fees are not capped from the builder, you might get hit with, say, an extra $6, $7, $10,000 in fees that you were not expecting. Another thing, which this is getting like a little granular, but while the condo is being built, there is a period called interim occupancy. And that is the period between when people can move into the condo and when the condo is actually complete. If you are investing, you want to ensure that there's a stipulation in there that you will be able to lease the unit during that time, because the last thing you want to do is sit on the property for, say, 6 months when you could be making money off of that. And actually, the last thing is assignments. So we discussed that earlier. You always want to have an escape plan. So you want to ensure that in the contract, there is an assignment stipulation in there that you are able to assign the property in the event that you want to.
Yeah, I love that because I think some developers they don't allow for assignments, correct?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, if you really want the development and there's no assignment, I mean, that's okay. But I would also recommend working with a lawyer who is well versed when it comes to pre construction, because I'm sure that we've all heard of these crazy stories, developers canceling or taking people's deposits, etc. So, you want to ensure that you have a trusted advisor on your side. In addition to that, do a little bit of due diligence. Go on Google, check out the builder, check out their finished projects, and just make sure that they're reputable, because it's times like these when interest rates are going up that the elite builders really stand out, because the people who are a bit smaller, they're going to be the ones that are hit the most when it comes to material costs. If they have any loans on the land, interest rates going up, that's really going to hurt them. And that in the end is going to hurt you, the purchaser. But if you work with an established developer, you can have peace of mind knowing, you know what, they care about their brand too much and they have enough resources that we can still have the boat floating during these turbulent times.
Awesome advice. And just to touch on that a bit, I believe that the premium builders and developers, they usually charge a bit more on the higher end. So I think it would probably make sense to pay that premium to have, some peace of mind, right?
Peace of mind, 100%. And even when it comes to the materials, right? The good builders, they're going to make sure that it's a good quality finished project. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gone into completed pre-construction projects and the grout is different colors and the doors aren't closing properly. And, they're just using very flimsy materials. So you want to ensure that you are investing in a good quality developer, because once again, we're always thinking about resale, right? And if it looks tacky from the jump, it's going to be a little harder for you when it comes time to sell the property. And some people do care about the developer's name, right? So if they say, oh, this is a Tridel building, perfect, I know that it's going to be solid.
Yeah. I've heard horror stories of people, doing their pre-checks before actually taking it over, and just the laundry list of things that they have to work on. It's like, but why?
Exactly.
You're paying all this money because condos aren't cheap anymore. Like they're up there with the prices of freehold. So like, you shouldn't have to be, making all these changes after a lengthy construction period, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the last thing that I want to sort of address when it comes to pre-construction and why I'm not necessarily the biggest fan right now is, number one, have you heard of inclusionary zoning?
Please enlighten us.
Okay, no problem. So inclusionary zoning, the city of Toronto, they said that about 7 to 10% of new units, and this could go up in the future, need to be allocated to low income housing. So what this is going to do is, yes, those 7 to 10% of units are going to be discounted, but who's going to be taking the hit for that decrease in price? Most likely the other investors who have all of the other units. So that's potentially going to hurt your bottom line. On top of that, I believe that in 2024, the development caps are going to be a little bit higher. I think it's around like $18,000 for a 1 bedroom and say around 30 something $1,000 for 2+ beds. So once again, this is something that the builder is most likely going to put onto the investors, which is going to once again impact your bottom line.
And I love that you touched on that, because that's another line item that, investors, homeowners, we don't necessarily take into consideration, because, we're accustomed to buying resales. So that's not included in there, but development fees are always included. So I think that's, a good tip that you added in there to make us aware that, that's an extra fee tacked on. So you have to take that into consideration.
Exactly. And like it sort of goes back to what we first said, rubbing shoulders and associating yourself with the right people. Because if you work with a realtor who isn't aware of that, for me, that's the first thing I'm going to tell my investor clients is, hey, these are the things coming down the pipeline and what could impact your bottom line. If you don't work with the right people, they might not provide you that information. I don't want to get into it too much, but working with people at the sales center, I would always recommend getting a third opinion from someone outside of the sales center, because at the end of the day, the reps at the sales center, they represent the builder, not you, and they have the builder's best interest at heart.
Precisely. Just to double back on the inclusionary, you said inclusionary zoning.
Zoning, yeah.
So is that at random? So you said 7 to 10% of the units are
the condos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know the extent of it. I don't know if it's a specific SAC, but I just know that there are a lot of buildings in Toronto who are going to be, or that are going to be subject to this.
Wow, that is wild.
I know, right?
I think I think the government's really just like trying to pick from everywhere, to really solve this problem, but not going deep enough. the housing
Yes.
issue. I don't think they're going deep enough to really find the root causes and really find the solution. So it's tragic
I
that,
agree.
it's tragic that they're trying to implement all these kind of things that really, it screws over someone at the end of the day, right?
It's just checking off boxes. That's just
That's
my
it.
personal opinion, though, but
That's
they're
it.
box
That's it.
checking.
That's it. Agree with you so much there. Yeah, we really touched on a lot there. Really appreciate you for sharing that wealth of knowledge. That there's a few things in there that I didn't even know of. So I know that our listeners would be very appreciative of that. We're coming a bit close to the end of the interview, but
Okay.
what are some, just to share with our listeners, what are some of your goals and areas of focus that you really want to tap into, I guess, from like a real estate investing perspective that you like to share with our audience?
So overall, my goal, I would say I don't need to do anything too crazy. I want to have at least 10 doors. I would recommend if you are going to get into the investment space, do not undervalue the value of a property manager. I currently don't have a property manager. I have 2 doors and it is a lot more work than I expected. And then also from just a real estate perspective, I do foresee myself growing, having a team, having our own location, not necessarily my own brokerage, because in terms of overhead and logistics, that might get a little bit confusing. But overall, as like an all-encompassing perspective, I just want to educate as many people as possible and provide value for as many people as possible, be it through, having seminars, helping out with organizations, going on podcasts. I just think that we all deserve to have easily digestible knowledge because we all deserve to build wealth at the end of the day.
Totally agree with you there. I love that you have a target of those 10 doors and just coming to that realization that, even a small number like 2 could really, give you that extra work that you weren't counting on when you just getting started out. Like, I could relate with that. So it's funny to hear that you're touching on that with having 2 doors. So
Exactly. Even as a realtor, right? It's like, okay, no, this is super light. No, it actually can get a little hard. And the 7 to 10% that you pay a property manager just to even free up your time, it's priceless. And at the end of the day, we want to make money while we are sleeping. So what can we do to provide ourselves with more time to create other streams of income? And I do want to say that these 10 doors, I want them to be diversified. So for example, I went to school in San Diego. I want one of them to be in San Diego. A couple of them, I want them to be Airbnbs in remote areas. And then the other ones will just be probably multifamilies because I'm huge on multifamilies.
Love it. I love that you want to diversify. I think that we all, I guess once we get started in this space, we want to have, like 200 doors in a building somewhere, right? You want to diversify and have, the different locations and different types of investments, right? So I love that.
Exactly.
So I'm guessing the next step for you is to possibly looking south of the border and seeing where you'd be able to pick up properties there as well.
Yeah, for sure. So my number one is going to be just to probably purchase another property in Durham. And that will be the property that I actually stay in. Lucky enough, I am blessed to be able to stay at home with my parents and save money and also have 2 families in my duplex. But I think my next property is going to be for myself. I'm outgrowing my space. I'm ready to just adult. And then after that, I do think that I will do buy a property south of the border for sure.
Love it. Love it. Love that we're expanding. I love to see us as young Black people really change it and shape our legacy and the trajectory of our family legacy as well, right? So love that.
Exactly. And collaborating, like I said, with people like you and having these conversations. And I don't want people to underestimate the power of joint ventures also, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have the appropriate documentation in place, doing a joint venture, it could be a hack to expediting you building wealth. So don't ever write that off. Make sure you find trusted partners, and that will open doors for you that you probably wouldn't be able to open on your own and at the speed in which you'd be able to do so on your own.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom coming from Jayden Kennedy herself.
Thank you.
This was a good conversation. Really, thank you for taking the time out to, just kick it with us today and really share your knowledge and, share your journey with us. And if our guests would like to, listeners would like to reach out to you, what would be the best way?
I'm Jayden Kennedy Real Estate on all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. So that would probably be the best way. You can DM me, shoot me an email, jaydenkennedyrealestate@gmail.com. And yeah.
Perfect. Jayden, again, thank you so much for taking time out today. We really shared a lot in today's episode and would love to have you back again sometime soon.
Of course. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Perfect. And to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on another episode. If you haven't done so, please take the time to give this podcast a 5-star rating. And if you haven't, tell a friend to tell a friend. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
What was the one thing you heard today that inspires you to take action? Now plan to take that action in the next 24 hours. If you're looking for more support, ideas, or just want to connect with others like you taking action, join us in the Black Wealth Effect Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Black Wealth Effect podcast.